Now, welcome to the beginning of another What If style story with a scenario that was decided upon by all of you, and where this time the top comment or vote getter was from Ahsoka Tano herself, who asked, "What if I didn't leave the Order?" Referring of course to what if Ahsoka didn't leave the Jedi Order at the end of Season 5 of Clone Wars after she was wrongly accused of a bombing on the Jedi Temple. Which in itself would certainly be an interesting scenario to play out and see where it takes us. But since it's kind of similar to the last one we did, or also includes Ahsoka, and that last one was what if Ahsoka had talked to Anakin during Revenge of the Sith, I'm going to spice it up a bit and add another sort of what if type scenario in there as well, and just let this thing run wild and become a whole separate sort of story. Furthermore, this is going to be a multi-part story, and this first part is mainly going to set the stage for things to come down the road, so do keep that in mind, please. Also, if you've never seen the particular episodes of Clone Wars this story is sort of following, or overwriting I guess you could say, that should be okay. Hopefully you'll be able to follow along regardless, and who knows, maybe this story will inspire you to watch these episodes. Anyway, without further ado, let's start this story. Okay, so you're watching the final episode of Season 5 of Clone Wars, the episode called The Wrong Jedi, and Barriss Offee has just confessed to the crimes Ahsoka Tano was accused of attacking or bombing the Jedi Temple. Barriss then gives her speech about how the Jedi are to blame for the war, that they have become an army fighting for the dark side after falling from the light they hold so dear. And though these words do seem to cause the Jedi to pause and quietly reflect on it a moment, to ponder if she is, perhaps, onto something, it's Ahsoka Tano we focus on, and she seems to give these words quite a bit of thought, more so than you remember from any other time you may have watched this episode. Thinking nothing of it though, you keep watching and you get to arguably the most gut-wrenching scene of the entire series, the one where Ahsoka is invited back into the Jedi Order, where the Council admits they were wrong, and Anakin himself says he's asking her to come back, and holds out her Padawan braid to her. Now, normally Ahsoka closes his hand and says she can't come back. But this time, after once again some debate and hesitation from her, she picks up the braid and clutches it tightly, and pulls it to herself, and quickly and in turn looks at each member of the council who is present, briefly looking into their eyes, before her gaze then settles upon Anakin, and she gives him a long look and a small smile that says, "Thank you for believing in me," before she just abruptly turns and walks away without a word. The council members all glance at each other in confusion, save Yoda and Anakin, who both just watch her walk away. Anakin then looks down at the ancient Jedi Master, who just gives him a single nod of the head in return, and thus Anakin goes after her. And after a little bit, he manages to catch up with her, calling out her name until she finally turns around and faces him. Rather hesitantly, he says, "So you're coming back then? Things can go back to normal now." Ahsoka frowns and replies, "I'm coming back, but things won't be going back to normal. Not that I know what normal even is. All I've known since I've been a Padawan is war." After a long silent moment of thought, she then quietly adds, What if Barriss was onto something? What if the Republic is destined to fall?" A flash of anger washes over Anakin's face and he folds his arms. "Well, if that's how you feel, then why are you coming back?" As soon as he's done saying those words, it's clear he regrets them. Anakin sighs as his arms drop to his sides, and he takes another step towards Ahsoka and says, "Nobody likes this war, Ahsoka, least of all the Jedi. But the reason we're fighting it is to save the Republic." In a calm and collected voice, Ahsoka then replies, "Save it from what exactly?" Before she simply turns and walks away. Anakin just stands there and watches her, clearly trying to figure out what she could have meant by that. In time, then we see Obi-Wan walk up behind him, Ahsoka now far off in the distance, and Kenobi says, "Give her time, Anakin. She's upset, and she has every right to be." With a bit of a smug look, Anakin glances over his shoulder at Obi-Wan and says, "Wasn't it you who told me grudges are nothing but anchors that keep you trapped in the past?" Obi-Wan's brow raises ever so slightly, as if surprised to hear Anakin remembers him saying that. Obi-Wan then says, "Yes, but I also said then that letting go was a virtue, one all us Jedi must master." Anakin doesn't seem to understand why Obi-Wan added that part, but before he can say anything else, Kenobi replies, "The Council has another mission for you and the 501st, and I won't be going with you on this one." Anakin grins and replies, "Good, things tend to go a lot smoother without you slowing us down." Obi-Wan frowns and says, "Smoother isn't exactly the word I'd choose. Besides, you won't be alone on this one. Masters Tiplar and Tip Lee are already there, and do take Ahsoka too if she thinks she's ready. Anakin then asks, and where is there exactly? Ring Govinda, Obi-Wan answers. Taking the ring station around the planet has become our top priority, but little progress has been made thus far. Again, Anakin smiles and then says, I'll see about changing that, and then walks away in the direction Ahsoka had headed. Obi-Wan then replies, with Anakin now too far to even hear, I know you will, Anakin. I know you will. We then jump ahead and right into the middle of the action on the ring station, and things look much like they did during the first episode of Season 6, the episode called The Unknown, where we saw this battle originally take place. Anakin, along with Jedi Tiplar and Tip Lee, and of course their clone forces, are steadily making their advance. The big difference, however, is this time Ahsoka is present, and it's clear by the look on her face that she's going about her duty with grim determination, that the words of Barriss Offee are probably still ringing in her head somewhere. At one point during the battle then, they all stop to discuss the strategy going forward, like what happened in the actual episode. And afterwards we see one of the clone troopers, Tup of course, having a moment like something's not quite right with his head. Again, like what happened in the episode. Fives notices and tells him to get it together, that they've done a mission like this 100 times before. But this time he's not the only one to notice something is wrong with Tup. Ahsoka, who sort of kept her distance during the brief meeting and had been keeping back a bit as everyone left the room, also notices, and she approaches Tup and Fives to ask what's wrong, which is when Tup eyes narrow on her, and in a rather sinister voice he says as he glares, Jedi. We even see the hand holding his blaster rifle twitch ever so slightly, as if he was about ready to raise it and point it at her. But before he can do anything of the sort, Fives gives him a hard smack on the back, asks him what's wrong to snap out of it, which seems to recalibrate Tup, if you will, and he shakes his head and seems to snap back to reality. Ahsoka asks them if everything is okay, which is when Tup puts his helmet back on and says, everything's fine, Commander, and simply marches away as if nothing ever happened. When Tup's far enough away, Ahsoka asks Fives, what was that? But Fives shrugs and says, not sure, Commander, but this war has a way of taking a toll on all of us, even us clones who were designed for it. Ahsoka then stares at Five intently, as if he's just said something rather profound or worth pondering, which makes Five shift uncomfortably. He then says, we better hurry. General Skywalker's plans wait for no one. Fives then jogs away, and after a few moments of thought, Ahsoka quickly follows. We're then taken back into the thick of battle, and again watch as the Jedi and clone forces are pushing the droid army back at a steady pace. At one point, we focus in on Tup, and we once again see something is wrong with him, that he's having mental issues of some sort. But yet again, Fives is there to snap him out of it, with a smack on the helmet and some words of encouragement, telling him to keep pushing forward, that they got the clankers on the run. But the clarity in Tup's head lasts only a moment or two before he starts repeating to himself over and over again that good soldiers follow orders, and soon enough his gaze falls upon and then narrows upon Ahsoka Tano, who is personally dealing with a group of 10 or so battle droids, and she's quickly slicing them into pieces. Which is when Tup takes a few steps in her direction and raises his blaster rifle, pointing it right at the back of her head, and he again says that good soldiers follow orders. Fives then seems to be the only clone trooper who notices this is happening and calls out his name in an alarmed fashion, which also causes Ahsoka to turn and see Tup's weapon pointed right at her head, just an instant before it fires. But that instant was just enough time for Ahsoka to raise one of her sabers to block the bolt. And then with her other saber, she severs a battle droid in two, uses the Force to take hold of its upper half, and flings it right at and into Tup, knocking him back into the ground and incapacitating him. Fives rushes forward to Tup's side and then looks up at Ahsoka. After she takes care of the last of the battle droids, she turns towards Fives and gives him a look and subtle motion of the head, as if to say, get him out of here. Fives gives a bit of a nod and starts dragging Tup's body back and out of the fray, screaming for a medic the whole time. Ahsoka then takes a quick but subtle look around to see if any of the other clones noticed what just happened or are maybe about to take a shot at her as well, but they all seem focused on the battle at hand, and so she turns and presses forward. Soon enough, the battle is over, and since there was no loss in momentum this time after the death of Tiplar like happened in the episode, the Republic forces manage to keep pushing forward and take the station, and we now see a group of clones ushering a captured Admiral Trench away. The 4 Jedi, Anakin, Ahsoka, Tiplar, and Tip Lee, along with some of the ranking clone troopers, watch him being taken away, and all, save Ahsoka, have a rather content and pleased look upon their faces as they essentially congratulate each other on the hard-fought victory. Once Tiplar and Tipley then walk away, Anakin, with Rex standing at his side, turns to Ahsoka and says, "I'm going to report our victory to the Council now. Why don't you..." But Ahsoka cuts him off and says, "I'm going to check on the wounded, see how many more lives this battle has cost us." Anakin doesn't seem to know what to say to that, and before he can even find any words, Ahsoka has already turned and started to walk away, having ordered Fives to accompany her. Anakin glances at Rex and says, "Well, she seems more headstrong than ever." Rex, who has his helmet off, gives Anakin a grin and says, "Yeah, wonder where she ever gets that from." We're then taken to the medbay and see Fives and Ahsoka along with a medical droid standing next to a bed with a sleeping Tup in it. The medical droid mentions something about them keeping him sedated as requested, but not understanding why. The droid also says that his injuries were not severe and that a full scan, as was also requested, revealed no sort of abnormalities, though he admits they do not have the type of machinery here that would be required to do a full brain scan. That could only happen on Kamino. Before moving away, the medical droid declares that this clone trooper is in perfect health and ready to return to duty. In a hushed voice, Ahsoka then says, "I trust you saw the same thing I did." Fives, who has his helmet off, lowers his eyes a bit and says, "Yeah, I saw it. I saw Tup try to shoot you." Ahsoka, looking upon Tup with concern in her eyes, then says, "I'm lucky I noticed something might be wrong with him earlier, that I was keeping tabs on him during the battle, or I would have never been ready for that." Fives then blurts out, "But why? Why would he do that? We all get stressed from time to time, but we clones were made to handle the stress." Ahsoka then says, "Everyone has a breaking point somewhere, even if this is what you were designed for." She's then quiet for a moment and asks, "Do you think anyone else saw?" Fives quickly shakes his head. "No, if any of my brothers had seen that, they would have reported it by now. They're good men, all of them." Ahsoka then gives Fives a gentle, calming smile. "I know they are, Fives. I don't doubt the loyalty of you and your brothers. I've been through too much with them. But something did happen to Tup out there, and we have to figure out what. We have to find out if this is an isolated incident or not." Fives then nods in agreement and asks, "Should we take this to the Jedi, to General Skywalker perhaps?" Ahsoka shakes her head. "For now, this stays between us." Fives then quickly asks, "What about Tup? He's going to wake up eventually, start talking." Ahsoka then says, "You're right, and maybe he should be woken up sooner rather than later." Ahsoka then grabs a medical device like a needle and jabs it into Tup's neck. A few moments later, Tup's eyes slowly flutter open. At first, he looks confused, like he doesn't know where he is or what's going on. He then starts mumbling, "Good soldiers follow orders," over and over again, until his eyes focus on Ahsoka. He then says, "Kill the Jedi," and tries to get up to attack her, but Ahsoka was ready for him and uses the Force to keep him pinned to the bed. She then jabs another needle-like device into his neck, and almost immediately Tup falls unconscious once more. Actions to which Ahsoka makes a quick apology and says that the clone is to be kept restrained and sedated at all times. The droid says that she isn't certified or qualified to give such orders or advice, that he is a medical droid and thus is programmed to not do anything that may go against the well-being of a patient, and that they need to leave now, which they do. Once in the hall just outside the medbay, they both glance around at the other troopers coming and going, and wait until no one else is around. That's when Fives quietly says, "What's gotten into him? Kill the Jedi?" Ahsoka shakes her head. "Maybe it's some sort of toxin or virus developed by the Separatists. I remember reading a report not long ago that said they may be trying to develop something that targeted the clones." Fives then says back, "If that's the case, wouldn't all clones be exposed at this point, those who are close to Tup? Couldn't we all potentially be a threat?" Ahsoka thinks for a moment and says, "If that is the case, why did only Tup snap like that?" She shakes her head and says, "This has to be something else, and we have to find out what that something is. We have to do more tests, perhaps." Fives gives her a bit of a skeptical look and says, "We? No disrespect, Commander, but this could be big. We should tell the rest of the Jedi, or at least General Skywalker." But Ahsoka shakes her head and replies, "Not yet. But her voice trails off and Fives gives her a look and then says to her, "There's something you're not telling me, isn't there?" Ahsoka gives a bit of a helpless shrug and says, "It's just a feeling." Fives cocks his head a bit and asks, "Like one of those Jedi feelings?" Ahsoka gives a sheepish grin and says, "Yes, one of those." She then pauses as a group of clones walks by and continues in a loud whisper once they're gone. Something is going on here. I can feel it. And the less people we tell about it right now, the better. Fives gives a bit of a sigh, almost as if he feels like he has no other choice, and then says, alright then. If it means helping Tup, then what's the plan? Ahsoka then quickly says, we have to get Tup to Kamino. That's the only place they'll be able to run a proper scan on him to figure out what's wrong with him. Fives looks skeptical and asks, and how are we going to pull that off? They're not just going to do it because we ask nicely. Not to mention, how do we get him to Kamino in the first place? Ahsoka's mind races, and then, after it looks like a light goes off in her head, she says, Anakin can file the orders that say Tup is to be taken to Kamino for a full brain scan and analysis after he suffered a head injury during the battle here on Ringo Varda. Fives looks ever skeptical and says, but the med droid just said he was fine. Unfazed, Ahsoka continues, the orders can also say that you are to be the one to escort him there. Fives, looking part confused and part frustrated, then says, but I thought we weren't going to tell anyone about this, not even General Skywalker. Ahsoka smiles and simply says, we're not. Fives, looking more confused than ever now, says, then how are we going to get him to give those orders? Ahsoka, a wry smile on her face, and says, Anakin's not the type to let the little things slow him down. Do you know how many times he's made me write up a report and file it, saying it's good practice for me? This will be just like that. Sort of. Fives then says back, do you know the type of trouble you can get in for falsifying orders? She shrugs and says, probably as much as Anakin gets into for always ignoring them. Fives shakes his head, but nevertheless doesn't argue any further. Instead he asks, and what about you? Will you be coming with me then? Ahsoka shakes her head, and her expression becomes rather grim as she says, no, there's someone else I need to talk to first. We then cut to a scene in the hangar bay of Ahsoka watching as Tup, still unconscious, is being loaded onto a small shuttle with Fives at his side. As the shuttle is taking off, Anakin enters the hangar and approaches Ahsoka, and he briefly and curiously glances at the shuttle as it exits out into space, as if he feels something is a little off about that, but he shakes it away and says to Ahsoka, are you sure about this? I can go with you if you want. Ahsoka shakes her head as she walks over to her Jedi starfighter and says that this is something she has to do alone. Without another word, she hops in, and within moments the fighter has left the hangar bay, docked with a hyperspace ring, and made the jump to lightspeed. We then see it again emerge from hyperspace over Coruscant, and quickly descends towards the planet after ditching the ring. That's when we're taken into some sort of facility on the planet's surface, and see Ahsoka walking down a drab gray hallway, with two red-clad shock troopers following close behind her. When they reach a door at the end of the hall, one of the shock troopers punches in a code, stands aside, and the door slides open, revealing a medium-sized room that has another doorway in it, which is actually a shimmering red energy field. And either way, tell me what you thought of this part of the story, and what you think will happen next, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.